Good evening. I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Thursday, September 8th. We begin tonight with the end of an era, the passing of our Queen. Queen Elizabeth II has died at the age of 96. Buckingham Palace made the announcement. This was hours after saying the Queen had been placed under medical supervision over concerns about her health. Members of the royal family, including Princes William and Harry, rushed to Scotland to be at her bedside. Queen Elizabeth was the longest reigning monarch in British history, serving 70 years on the throne. Her 73-year-old son, Charles, automatically becomes monarch. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the Queen was one of his most favorite people in the world, and he will miss her enormously. The late Queen Elizabeth regularly expressed her affection for Canada in her many visits to the country. We'll now take a look at the Queen in Canada.
The rising generation, whether English or French speaking, could show so clearly that you belong to one great Canadian family.
The year when all Canada looks back over 100 years of growth and solid achievement.
There could be no better moment for me as Queen of Canada to declare again my unbounded confidence in the future of this wonderful country. For the past 3 years, this rich expanse has been yours in its most precious sense, and it bears the name you chose, that speaks of your ancestors, Canada's original citizens. During my lifetime, I have been a witness to this country for more than half its history since Confederation. I have watched with enormous admiration how Canada has grown and matured while remaining true to its history, its distinctive character, and its values. This nation has dedicated itself to being a caring home for its own, a sanctuary for others, and an example to the world. God bless you all, and God bless Canada.
Well, as momentous as the death of Queen Elizabeth II is after 70 years on the throne, Canada's governance will continue. The monarch remains the constitutional head of state in this country, no matter who is filling the role at any given time. Now, that's according to Philippe Legas, an associate professor of international affairs at Carleton University. He is also an expert on the role of the crown in the Westminster system of government. It means the succession from the Queen to her eldest son, the now King Charles, is automatic. Now, this is without any disruption to governing bodies that sit in her name or to legislation, oaths, or other legal documents issued in her name. Dr. Legas says this transition does not require any action on Canada's part. Stay with us. Forum Daily will return after the break with more news coverage. We'll be right back. Canadians are increasingly vulnerable to payment shock as higher household debt levels collide with oversized interest rate hikes. The Bank of Canada raised its key lending rate by 0.75 percentage point, making it even more expensive to borrow money. Experts say more and more Canadians will be pushed to rely on high interest rate loans and credit cards to pay for the soaring cost of everyday goods. This comes as a new report by TransUnion indicates millions of Canadians could default on their debt. Meanwhile, concerns are rising among some professionals in the financial industry as the world of sports betting continues to grow following the legalization of single-game betting last year. Well, joining us now to tell us more about his concerns around this is Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me, Nima.
Now, according to this TransUnion report, Canadian consumers had racked up $2.2 trillion in debt by the second quarter of 2022. Now, meanwhile, you're expressing some concern that we're still seeing advertisements promoting gambling and sports betting on TV and online. So tell us a little bit more about these concerns, Brendan.
Well, how the two are connected is that when people find themselves in financial difficulty, they want to get rich quick scheme. And as the great sports commentator John Madden said, the road to Easy Street runs through the sewer. And we're already seeing it in my industry through these online discount brokerage, which are offering people margin, offering people leverage, offering to lend people money to buy stock. And people have taken their own lives over the negative consequences of borrowing money to buy stock when they really have no business doing that. And now we're seeing this expanding beyond the stock and investing business into much more mainstream, because there, for however many stock investors there are millions more sports enthusiasts. And now it's promotion after promotion after promotion, including some big name stars are pushing people toward gambling their way to financial prosperity. And that's just not how it's going to go.
Now, as you said, we are seeing these big name stars promoting online gambling and sports betting. We saw Wayne Gretzky, Kevin Hart, and other high-profile celebrities. So tell us a little bit more about your thoughts of using these large platforms to promote gambling, especially during inflation.
I got to say, Wayne, if you're watching this, I think it's absolutely unconscionable that the most successful hockey player in the history of the world will use the platform that he has to promote betting that will eventually result in hockey fans taking their own lives. That's how it's going to play out. This is not fun. This is a dark and dangerous road. And again, I want to putting it, not to put too fine a point on it, it's only been about 15 years ago the Gretzky family was wrapped up in a whole illegal gambling scandal. Didn't amount to much, but I think the Gretzky name is a little too closely associated with sports betting. I know it's all been legitimized now, but there was a reason that there were laws against it for the longest time, because it does real damage. And I think the greatest hockey player in the history of the game has no business promoting this.
And to add to that, Brendan, it's a lot easier to get into gambling now, especially following the pandemic. A lot of people are betting on their phones from home. So what are the possible financial impacts of this to individuals?
Well, I mean, Candy Crush is a gateway drug. I've spent time on video games far more than I should. But the pandemic has got people into video games in a way, and with the new phones, you don't have to even leave your desk. You can do it all the time. It's a very short jump to getting rid of candy to buying upgrades on your metaverse character to actually straight up gambling on your phone, on the subway. I think the financial implications of gambling, there is a Gamblers Anonymous, the equivalent to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I mean, the damage you can do in gambling can happen so quickly relative to the years it usually takes for people to really do damage to their lives through drinking. Gambling, they can do it a lot more. Houses, lives, marriages, families, the losses are open-ended.
Very important information to consider there, Brendan. Again, thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation.
Thank you, Nima.
Stay with us. We'll be back after the break, and Catherine Murray joins us with Forum Daily's weekly market update. The host of The Buck Stops Here will unpack the latest big moves in the markets and what to look for in the fast-moving financial world. And after that, of course, we'll take a look at the major news stories and headlines from around the world. So stay tuned to Forum Daily. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. Forum Daily's weekly market update with Catherine Murray is up. Catherine is the host of The Buck Stops Here, and she joins us now. All yours, Catherine.
Thanks, Nima. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly market recap. I am Catherine Murray. Well, we are seeing North American equity markets move higher today, following a big jump in U.S. equities yesterday, and also the TSX moving and closing higher on Wednesday. The big news in the markets this week, of course, has been what we've heard from the BOC, and in fact, centers around central bankers around the world. The BOC did raise rates by 75 basis points yesterday, lifting the benchmark rate to 3.25%, and also reiterated that rates will need to rise further. The statement did lean hawkish, and importantly, the statement played down the peak inflation narrative. And therefore, the BOC will be unlikely to pause in their rate rise hikes. Recall the market had been moving higher, the equity markets had been moving higher on the back of the view that the BOC, as well as the US Federal Reserve, will talk about peak inflation. In other words, that inflation will be in the past, and therefore they don't have to be as aggressive in the rate hike cycle. That has not been the case. That is not what we're hearing from the BOC. It's not what we're hearing from the US Federal Reserve at Jackson Hole, let alone in an interview this week with Fed Chair Jerome Powell. In other words, they seem very much intent on raising rates further. The big question, of course, is what does that mean for the Canadian economy as well as the US economy? And the concern there, of course, is will they cause a recession by hiking too aggressively? Interestingly, though, we did see the markets react calmly to the news yesterday from the BOC and also, of course, today. So maybe investors believe that central banks, in fact, have it wrong and will pause in their rate hikes. That's the takeaway. Other takeaways, though, as it relates to the BOC rate rise, there's concern that aggressive rate hikes will plunge the economy into a recession. That's from the Toronto Star. And also that Canadians will really have payment shock as interest rates rise. Again, according to the Toronto Star, some views and reports there. Importantly and interestingly, and this always gives you a bit of a gauge in terms of the outlook for the Canadian economy, the Canadian dollar did not rise by very much following the aggressive rate hike. Remember, money flows to where it gets paid the most. So you would think that people would be buying the Canadian dollar because we are raising our rates. They're going to get paid more. You'll get paid more in your bank account. That was not the case. You have to ask why. Why is that not the case? Likely because of the lack of friendliness towards our oil and energy industry. If we were able to capitalize on that, you would see a commodity currency like the Canadian dollar moving higher. Now, of course, to be fair, we do have the US dollar showing some significant strength against the Canadian dollar as well as the euro. That's really been of note to many investors as well, just that strength of the US dollar and the pressure that that can put on other economies around the world. Importantly as well, when we take a look at the price of oil, it is up by about 1.7% today, following a 5.7% decline yesterday. The reason for the decline, of course, is concerns surrounding global demand destruction stemming from China, where lockdowns do continue. They've been extended. And also, of course, the energy crisis in Europe is stoking a global growth scare. So global demand destruction very much weighing on the price of WTI. Now, having said that, there is and has been no structural supply change. Of course, it would take years for that to happen. So that should act as a bit of a support for the price of WTI. Also, to add to support for WTI or the price of oil, tighter supply coming from OPEC Plus, and also Europe's coming ban on Russian oil imports. So certainly a lot at play as it relates to the price of WTI, but again, importantly, no change in that supply structure. The only aspect really weighing on oil to the downside is concerns surrounding global growth. In terms of market action today, a bit of a risk on day in those US markets. You're seeing banks, biotech, restaurants, cruise lines, rails, as well as industrial metals all moving higher. So that's a bit of a positive, a risk on day. And in Canada, you're also seeing the markets move a little bit higher, but somewhat quiet from a headline perspective. We'll probably take that. What to watch for tomorrow? We've got Canadian jobs. The consensus is looking for a 15,000 job gain in August. That follows a surprise 31,000 loss of jobs in July. But I just pointed that RBC and CIBC are a little bit more moderate, looking for a 5,000 job gain. So we'll see what that comes out to tomorrow. Nima, I'll leave it there. Back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Catherine. For more on the markets and the world of finance, be sure to tune in to Catherine Murray on The Buck Stops Here. Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break with a look at the major headlines and news stories from around the world. So stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. The European Central Bank has raised its key benchmark rate by 0.75 of a percentage point for the 19 countries that use the euro currency. This marks the bank's largest ever interest rate hike since the euro's launch in 1999. Analysts indicate the goal is to fight record inflation, which is squeezing the wallets of consumers and pushing Europe toward recession. According to economists, inflation may rise into double digits in the coming months. This comes after it reached a record 9.1% in August. All right, well, meanwhile, a new British Prime Minister, Liz Truss, says her government will cap domestic energy prices to ease the cost of living crisis. Ms. Truss says the move will mean real savings for families and businesses. The energy price guarantee means average household bills will be no more than $3,700 a year. Power bills had been due to rise to more than $5,000 a year in October. European nations have been dealing with record inflation that's squeezing consumers and pushing the continent toward recession. Turning to the U.S. now, where the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is announcing major new military aid for Ukraine and other European countries threatened by Russia. Mr. Blinken made the announcement in Poland today. He said the Biden administration would provide $2 billion in long-term foreign military financing to Ukraine and 18 of its neighbors. Now, that's on top of a $675 million package of heavy weaponry, ammunition, and armored vehicles for Ukraine alone. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced this package earlier in Germany. Well, as tensions rise in the East, Japan's foreign minister says there's an increasing need for India and Japan to step up security cooperation. Now, this comes as the two countries held talks to further strengthen military ties amid growing concerns around China and Russia in the region. Japan's foreign minister and defense minister met today in Tokyo with their counterparts from India, and their meeting comes at a very sensitive time, while Russia holds a major multinational military exercise in its Far East with China and India participating. Moving to Albania now, where Special Forces police have forced the door of the Iranian embassy in Tirana. Well, this comes after the last staff members left the building following the government's order to expel them. On Wednesday, the Albanian government gave the Iranian embassy's staff 24 hours to leave the country. This is over a major cyber attack that the Albanian government blames on Iran. It is the first known case of a country cutting diplomatic relations over a cyber attack. Back in the U.S., Donald Trump's longtime ally, Steve Bannon, has surrendered to authorities in a New York court. He's expected to face charges that he duped donors who gave money to build a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. An earlier federal prosecution on similar charges ended before trial when the former U.S. president pardoned Mr. Bannon. In that case, Mr. Bannon was accused of pocketing more than $1 million. All right, turning our attention to a new report that has found that clean energy now provides more employment than the fossil fuel industry. According to the International Energy Agency's definition, clean energy also includes nuclear power. It is now estimated to account for over half of the 65 million energy sector jobs across all regions, except for Russia and the Middle East. The agency notes that except for the nuclear industry, wages in clean energy jobs lag behind those in the fossil fuel industry. In Pakistan, the Prime Minister is urging the world to step up the fight against climate change as a way to avoid more deadly flooding. The country continues to struggle with the aftermath of the most devastating floods in its history. The deluges have killed at least 1,355 people, affected 3.3 million more, and made more than 500,000 others homeless. It looks like lobster will be taken off the menu at some retailers. This comes after the influential conservation group Seafood Watch added the Canadian and American lobster fisheries to its red list of species to avoid. The organization said in a report this week that the fishing industry is a danger to North Atlantic right whales. Thousands of companies follow the group's recommendations, and HelloFresh and Blue Apron are among those to say they will not be selling lobster. The NFL will kick off its 2022 season tonight with a clash between the Buffalo Bills and Super Bowl champion LA Rams tonight. The Bills are among the favorites to win the Super Bowl this season, while the Rams will look to kickstart their title defense with a win at home. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website or follow us on our social media accounts. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily News.